Welcome to Hashtag Analytics, a conversation between two individuals, one that's super passionate and one that's super opinionated, both around the topic of analytics. Luke,
Yeah,
what are we talking about today?
yeah, we are talking about everything Tableau Conference. Just finished up last week, just wrapped up, and
Yay!
we were actually. It's been a while since we're back, so it's like, and
We're
it's great
back.
to see you doing a podcast again.
I think we are both happy to be back, especially with the amount of enthusiasm, energy, and interesting new things coming out of conference. And
Yeah, there's a lot of energy coming out of conference, and you definitely see that on the internet. A lot of people blogging, having resolutions for the next year going into. I think really the conference is an impetus to kind of do things differently, change what you're doing, and we like to see how far that goes into next year for sure. And I think we're guilty of the same thing. Like, we have a lot of ambitions leaving a conference of 17,000 passionate individuals. The real question will be is, can we keep it up?
yeah, how long will the energy sustain itself? We are 1 week post-conference, and so the goal is that energy will continue to grow throughout the year. So next year we have, 20,000 super impassioned Tableau community individuals, people at this data conference, and that the people on Twitter that you see today, that population has doubled, right?
That's a very impressive metric to attempt to attain. And I guess it's, how do we do that?
That is the question. So Luke, I'm curious. We've got all these blogs that are out where people are talking about, what it was that they loved about TC, what their favorite moments are. So break it down for me. What were your favorite moments?
Well, there's some standard ones when we think about them. Iron Viz being one. We're going to table that right now because we're going to talk about that. It's always a good conversation, so we might as well just throw it in. But I think the big moments for myself were three big personal highlights. Presented with you, Workout Wednesday. We did that live, and I think my insights are probably much different than what you would think they would be from them. The second is we also both participated in a speed tip tournament. 8 people went in. 1 person remained as champion, and that was a lot of fun. There was a lot of prep that went into it. Round 1 was a 1-minute tip. Round 2 was also 1 minute, and then there was a 10-minute Viz creation battle. Epic battle at the end. And I think everybody who's there, thanks for showing up. There was a lot of prep from everybody who went into it for those first 2 rounds to get your tips ready. I know that I personally probably overinvested time, probably put between 10 and...
Yeah.
Oh, I won. Yes, I did. I probably put in 10 to 12 hours for a couple of 1-minute tips. I do not talk as fast as Anne can, so I had to practice that and really know what to say on every single point so that I could cram in a lot of information in 1 minute and do it really fast. So it was almost like muscle memory. I can't speak like you can, Anne. I just can't move. I know I can when I have to. It's just take some time. And the last one, by the way, is that I got to hire an individual, Steve Fenn, and it's really exciting to have him on board on the team starting really soon. So that was super exciting to have someone of his caliber join the team. He has like 3-5 times more Twitter followers. Not that that's a metric, but when you're like, whoa, this guy's really good at what he does, and it's great to have him on the team.
Certainly it denotes consistency in that he has a captive audience. If he's got more Twitter followers than both of us probably combined, it sounds like.
Oh, yes. So, Anne, what were your top moments?
So this year, I think the conference was all about yes for me. So this is the 3rd conference I've been to. The first 2, so the first one I felt like I was anonymous. Nobody knew who I was. I didn't really know who people were. I started getting involved in the community in preparation for TC15. So I was kind of a lurker in the shadows, kind of adjacent. Last year was better, but this year I think it was all about yes. This is the first year that I spoke. So, well, last year I did the tips battle, which was awesome, right? But it was sort of a last minute thing. It wasn't something that was built up for me throughout the year. So us actually submitting speaker presentations and getting those to be on a large stage or, an actual session was huge. So I really love that aspect. I'm in agreement with you. Workout Wednesday was amazing. I think it went off better than I anticipated in person. I think I got a lot of positive feedback from people that were like, thank you for giving us a space to actually solve a problem while we're here at conference. Thank you for not talking at me, for making it collaborative. So that was really inspiring for me, and seeing something that has been in the community for a long time, that Andy Kriebel started, that Emma and Andy really got off the ground, in the way we've continued to evolve it in 2018, to see that become so substantial at conference and it become very foundational was huge. And then the speed tipping with Lorna, I think, was a big moment for both of us. We had that on Thursday, but I think we both felt a big sense of pressure in making sure that we delivered something awesome in a really.
You crushed it for sure. It was, I didn't put it as, we wrote down notes before this and I didn't put it down as a highlight, but because I wanted to just like leave my comment off so that I could share it now, is that I really felt like what you and Lorna did was really, you got the baton from two Zen masters and Andy Kriebel and Jeff Schaefer, and really went with it and said, all right, we are going to go and crush and demolish your records that you kind of put on the table year after year. And there were a couple of tips, I have to admit, that I didn't know, and I have to ask you for some additional advice on how to do still. So it was very impressive, not just from the speed, but being able to show and how to grasp the tool. And I just want to point out, for a lot of people who might be listening for the first time, that 126 tips is not necessarily tips as it is 126 things you can do to master the skills of using Tableau. It was super awesome to watch. I think there was really, like, I could see it happening, where I think that you and Lorna are taking on like this whole new generation of leaders in the field.
Yeah, so I think it's kind of fun. Like, if you think about my conference experience and what it was I did from a speaking perspective, it was all very hands-on, like in the tool. And I think that's what probably my favorite thing about Tableau to do is actually use it. So that was really kind of fun for me. My other kind of favorites, they did a lot of tweaking of some of the sort of adjacent things to the conference, and I think they did that for the best. So Data Plus Women was one that it's traditionally on Monday, pre-conference, or sort of like before the welcome reception. This year they made it a full hour and a half on Tuesday afternoon. It conflicted with some of those larger sessions, but it was a great opportunity. They had a panel discussion. Anya Ahern got up and talked about bias, which was huge. I really respected that. I'm going to put it out there now. That needs to be a keynote session. It needs to be on the big stage. There were some conversations and authentic voices in that room that everyone needs to hear about. One of the speakers had said, I don't want to keep coming back and having a Data Plus Women conversation. We need to move on from this. And I think how we move on from it is we make it something that commands the keynote, right? There were some things I know I shared with you, Luke, about even from a community perspective that we do without giving it much thought, that were just eye-opening, I think, from my perspective. And I'll say my very first Tableau experience, I went to a Data Plus Women session, and that's really what kind of gave me my voice to feel like I could contribute. So I just have a very special place in my heart for that. So I love to see that is getting even more attention this year, or got more attention this year, and becoming more substantial.
And I heard so many, not just from you, I heard from so many other people that we all missed out for those who didn't go to that session. And I can't remember where I was. We discussed it like before, and I was like, I can't go. I've got a conflict. Oh, I had to, for those who didn't know, I lost my wallet on Monday of the conference, and I finally was able to go get it. That was on Wednesday, right? So it was like Wednesday just after lunch, and it was the only time I had available to go get it. Otherwise, I wasn't going to eat my own food for the third straight day. So lame excuse, totally know it, but don't lose your wallet the day of a conference when it starts, and you're going to have to I had to scrap together food. That's a great segue, right? Talking about how I lost it from Data Plus Women. I'm a terrible human being, but at least I know it.
Well, the takeaway there is, and it's important, right? I've had men in the past say, "Is this something that I'm allowed to go to?" It's a data plus women session. Absolutely, it is. If you are a feminist, if you are a person who values equality on the earth, go to this session and hear what it's about. I think in a lot of ways, there are people who feel like a minority or an outcast in some way, especially I think a lot of data people, how we approach the world. And you'll get a lot of just good energy surrounding that by being there. And if nothing else, it shows support. And again, it's sort of different than a normal session, right? You're not necessarily learning about Tableau or the tool or how to build a COE. You're learning about people's experiences and getting advice that you can take with you.
And that's just something that I think would be not just focusing on that around the conference would be add a ton of value, because we do focus and it's a Tableau conference, it's tool specific, but being able to have that broader understanding of how we operate as a society, or how we operate as a profession, adds so much more value to a conference. Being able to root it back in in those things, right? It's not just about the tool. We can certainly bring that in and loop that in and weave it in, but it's more than that. And being able to have those types of sessions available are what really make conference goers value that their experiences. And I think that's what we're trying to highlight here.
Yeah, I think we both had sort of a common conception of brain dates, and meeting people one-on-one is huge for the conference. I mean, when I think about myself, we had our brain date where we talked about Workout Wednesday, and we got feedback from people, and we asked, hey, where do you want to see this go? I had a couple other brain dates, and those were really powerful and transformative, at least for me and what I want to do. And probably, and again, something I can't get unless I'm in the same room with other people. The other stuff, I can kind of fake it. It's on YouTube, right? You can take some of that how-to away, but that moment you can't recreate outside of the confines of that week.
Yeah, I think that's a huge takeaway for anybody, is that the sessions are great, but the secret tip of the conference, if you're looking to figure out how to hack the conference, is to really skip most of the sessions and network and understand people and really get to know them a lot better. Is like I actually went to the most sessions I ever went to this year. I went to 6. That's like miles past. My previous record was 2. And I just like to connect with people and understand maybe I like to meet with the dev. Like, one thing I always like to do is meet with dev teams, meet with project managers, meet with evangelists at Tableau, understand their viewpoint of the product, so that I really have a even deeper understanding of the roadmap. Because we do use the tool so much, in that we need to, I personally need to have that context to really see how it's going to drive the future of what I'm doing. And it's so easy to do, because if you reach out, a few weeks before, or even the week of, like I asked to have breakfast with Ben Jones the night before, and he was like, yeah, I got time. Like, let's go grab breakfast. It was like perfect. I booked every day I had a breakfast with someone new, because it's so easy. That's like, you don't realize that is an opportunity. Sure, there's a breakfast that's free that you can go get, but people love getting off site, really seeing the city. And if like, find 1 or 2 good places to go, you can kind of drag them in and say, hey, let's go and get breakfast in this place, and let's talk shop a little bit. And obviously we're all passionate about the tools, so it's a fun thing to do. For sure.
I will say that if you recall, Luke, when we did one of our prior podcasts, we talked about conferences, because we had just I had come back from Alteryx Inspire, and you had come back from your 2 conferences.
Mm-hmm.
I had someone come up to me at Tableau Conference and say, thank you for your advice on how to approach conferences. That's how I've actually done it this time. So Leanne, thank you for coming up to me. She said it was invaluable for her to really have the same experience that we're describing. I think it takes a lot of pressure off people as well to know that it's okay to miss like sessions if you're meeting someone, because it's potentially going to benefit your career. more than learning how to do set actions, which we can't negate set actions. Maybe that's what overstated, but certainly, once in a lifetime opportunity.
Hmm. Absolutely. And I just also wanted to point out, like, one thing we skipped over, and then maybe I'm switching topics here, but back to our Workout Wednesday session, is that people asked, how'd it go? And I don't respond the way that they probably expected, because they would be like, oh, it went really well. And I'm just, as you know, I'm not someone who's going to reflect and say something went well. Uh, what I focused on and kind of my big takeaway from is the feedback I received in real time. We had 150 people in the room working on a single problem and watching how they approach. And they're working in teams as well. So you like see how the team dynamic is playing, and they should be able to move almost quicker because they have this team dynamic. They can share knowledge, but knowing the processes that people are taking will help us develop better problems going forward. And our brain data as well. That was so great that we kind of have a path to improving some of the stuff that we're doing there.
Yeah, I agree. I think going back to the Workout Wednesday session, we had spent a lot of time thinking through what that was going to look like and focusing on different ways to solve. So one of my big things, and that's what's been really powerful for me about working on Workout Wednesday, is knowing that there's different ways to get to the same solution. I always like to say there's not a right or wrong solution. There's an accurate solution, right? And accuracy can be approached many different ways. So I think it was really inspiring to go around to talk to these people and say, well, what is the direction that you're taking on this? And a lot of times I think people were always surprised because they would say, am I doing this wrong? And I'm like, there is no wrong, right? You just tell me how you're going. It's either going to lead you in the right direction, you'll get an accurate result, or not. And I think, at least for newer people, I hope that helps them understand the way you can approach and solve problems, that there isn't one solution, and hopefully it brings up and elevates their confidence and gives them that oomph that they need, and also that being collaborative is helpful, right? The best part about it for me as well was, we had some very seasoned people in the room that didn't finish at the end of our session, and that's totally okay. It's completely okay, and it's totally to be expected, right? It's unrealistic to think that you'll finish it in 20 minutes. I mean, maybe Rosario will, maybe because she's awesome, but in general, it takes a little bit of time and some trial and error to get to a solution. And having that safe space where we got to the end and everyone was very open about how far they took things, I think was really cool to see.
I've always put the criteria of 5 calculations. Nothing can have more than 5. It always has to be super small chunk. I actually think of that it's still too big of a bite, because I would love it to be under an hour for people to do things. And I just I miscalculated how individuals work, right? We have an idea and we're like, boom, 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 done. And for everybody else who's doing it for the first time, who haven't thought about it subconsciously for potentially hours, days, weeks, months, they're experiencing it for the first time and might necessarily have a solution as fast. So it's just that was such a huge takeaway for me. Again, we're just talking about Workout Wednesday, but I hope everybody's going to the conference and whatever they're doing, self-reflecting on their own practices and how they can improve them in the end. I guess that's a really broad way to kind of bring this all back. So we talked about our session. I went to 6 sessions. That said, I want to highlight. I think what we could do is highlight our favorite sessions or things that we've watched, because they're already available on YouTube. There's Tableau public visualization that's available. I just go straight to tc18.tableau.com and then go and you can click and watch, and there's you can pick on any of the sessions, and for the sessions where there's videos, you can watch them. There's a couple that I think we want to highlight, right?
Yeah. So for me, the sessions that I went to were mostly my own because of how busy that I was. My first session that I watched coming out of TC was actually one that I wanted to go to, which was by Neil Richards, which was design-driven data. So I got a chance to watch this, I think, probably Sunday night when I came back. This is one not to miss because he sort of flips the whole notion of how you develop on its head. He focused a lot on what he's been doing from a public portfolio perspective of building out visualizations that are inspired by music covers, so album art, and even things that he's seeing in museums, and taking that experience and then almost retrofitting data into it. And the reason why I love it beyond how he's drawing inspiration from other things was that it gives people a space to say, okay, I don't have to design a bar chart that needs to be obvious within 3 seconds. Not everything always has to be so obvious. There's space for stuff to be explored and understood, and really that you have to take it in, right? Like you can imagine like some of the stuff that he makes, you have to kind of try to figure it out. You have to say, well, it's not really obvious what this is because it's nothing I've ever seen before. So that was a big one for me that I think everyone who's in the community or everyone who's kind of going and thinking about data should be conscious of, because it's not the traditional business analytics approach to things.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. I've had similar conversations around the whole concept of data ink ratio and having the most efficient visualizations as possible. But sometimes it almost pays to break it up and put something that in there that's a little bit out there that draws a little more thought. And maybe it's not as efficient, but it really does the job really well as well. Like, do you invest a lot more space for something that's going to be more insightful, even though the data to ink ratio is not as compact? Like the density of that information isn't necessarily there. And I would say probably. It's what's wrong with that.
So what sessions did you go to? I know you were at speed tipping with me and obviously the user group battle, but what sessions did you go to that I didn't go to?
Yeah, the big one that I really wanted to highlight was Paul Benoob's session. He basically runs Tableau server for UBS. Hopefully I got that right, but I'm pretty sure it's UBS. And he runs their whole analytics program. And what I found amazing and super fascinating, why I really wanted to go to it, and I was hoping this is what I would get out of it, and it's exactly what I got, is that he really just opens up and shows everything from how his server was set up in terms of the core, the structure, really on the technical side, but also how to develop a center of excellence. So it's like not many organizations are really just being like, I'm an open book. You want to know how I'm doing this? This is how I'm doing this. And he laid it all out there in 50 minutes. And we love to, like, we don't kind of get that access no matter what organization that you're working for. You usually just have N of one and it's your own experience, and then you might have an offhand conversation about what someone else is doing out there. He was just like, here it is. You want to know what to do? Well, I might not be doing it right, but here's what we're doing. And that to me was to be open and honest about what you're doing in your organization is absolutely something that everybody should be doing to improve the overall profession. And not everybody does that. Everybody's got their secrets that they want to keep. Like, oh, my configuration of my server is like this, but that's for us, is not for you. I think that's like the number one session that I went to, and I was hoping it was going to be good, and it wasn't good. It was great. Rare, a rare stamp of approval from me for sure. I also really enjoy. So I really had a one-track mind on this. It was like, let's focus on center of excellence, and then the other one was Fee Gordon's session on achievement unlocked, gamifying an organization in terms of how it can grow its developer base into a really high level. And some of Fee's material actually made it into Paul's session because I think Fee joined Paul's team. Obviously,
that's the other Paul. That's Paul Chapman.
Other Paul. Gotcha.
Yeah. But they're closely tied.
Yeah. So those are the types of things that I really wanted to hear about. I appreciate people sharing really cool visualizations and how to do it. But I really went for practicalities, and that's why I'm not like too worried. I can go back and watch those videos. They're available. And in that moment, that's the information that I wanted to consume.
Well, that's what I'm definitely going to have to check out because, part of my day job is to do this kind of thing, right? To deploy a server and to do different things. So it's always nice to see truly how someone is doing things because it is well guarded and because you think about the types of people, the roles of individuals that are actually doing that work. And sometimes they're adjacent to most of the people that you find in the community. It's rare to find a server admin or someone who cares a lot about hardware architecture. Usually you find someone more on the front end, the visual side or the data side, which is totally fine. I happen to be a fan of both. So that's one I'm definitely going to want to check out. I mean, talking about just awareness in server, I was shocked in the keynote that statistic that 25% of all new Tableau deployments are on Linux. I didn't realize it was that prolific so soon. And so even just that information, because where else are you really going to get that?
I may have met with some people from the server team because I actually find I'm not an expert at all in that space, but I do find having insights on how Tableau server can be optimized and performed go a really long way when working with your teams. And I know for a fact is that when you use Linux, there's just some performance improve. I mean, maybe I'm not supposed to share stuff, but I feel like the move to Linux, you're going to see performance improvements when you're going side by side in terms of identical hardware.
Well, that's good to know. I mean, I would say that, it's pretty obvious that they're at least they've got some skin in the game if Tableau Online is mostly on Linux. I mean, I don't know how big of a secret it is. I asked someone and they said every single instance of Tableau Online except for Dublin is now on Linux on AWS. So they've made that change. They're obviously investing in that direction for the platform. So, I don't think you can find those statistics anywhere else readily available. Those are the kinds of things that certainly I like to take away and give back to my clients that are thinking about things, or as I'm doing those things, be conscious and aware of them.
Can I just add that there's two speakers that I really missed out on?
Yeah.
Well, I didn't necessarily miss out on it. Like Georgia Lupi was there and she spoke on data humanism, and I may have attended a session that is on that, so that's why I sort of skipped it. But I know she's like really good. And then Mike's session, Mike Cisnero, former guest Mike, did a session that's really similar to that. I actually have already listened to it, and it's like there's a lot of similarities that you can draw. So if you missed George's session, listen to Mike Cisnero's session. And then the other, it was also a speaker, a guest speaker is Shane Snow. He's got a really great book, Dream Teams. I really use that as like it's the best, as you would call it, self-help book that I've read this year. I don't read self-help books.
You know how much I love self-help books. So,
but there's just some great information on growing teams from that, and I can guarantee you it was good. There's just I know what he would have brought to the table, and that's why I didn't need to go. Read all of his books, and I'm sure that I'm just have caught those moments rather than having to see the Cliff Notes version of it.
Well, yeah, I'm sad that I missed out on Georgia as well, because I think it's what's really nice about what I'm seeing is Tableau is really opening itself up in terms of having speakers in that are more agnostic or approach data differently than just using their tool. Again, not just that sort of business context of things. So I was bummed that I missed that. As I think I was talking during that time. I think you were probably at speed tipping, and that's why you missed it.
That's right.
And then I was also intrigued by, I missed it, obviously, but Adam Grant's talk where he actually, I don't know how well it was known, but there was a survey put on literally asking about the Tableau community and trying to dissect what it was and its approach. I mean, his whole stance on givers and takers. And so I thought it was really quite powerful to know that there were givers highlighted in the community. I got a text message that had like my picture on it, or my name on it. And I was like, what is this? It's just a weird collection of names. And then I found out that it was literally highlighting all the givers in our community. So to know that again makes it to a keynote session speaks volumes for how much Tableau invests in the community and, the type of caliber of individual that is in our community.
Yeah, I missed that as well. I can't remember what we were doing on a Thursday morning. Sleeping in from day to night out, probably, and thinking.
Was it Thursday morning? It was probably. It was Thursday morning. Yeah, that one I missed. That one I'm really bummed that I missed. I got some good notes on that one, but that one I think it was pretty cool to.
I should have read. should have read the fine print that it was not going to be available on video, because I was just like, I'll just watch the video. It'll be totally fine, because I've a couple people know that I'm trying to get through every single video that from the conference. It's not that hard. You just like put it on double speed and work throughout the day. And when you take your headphones off after listening at double speed, things move really slow.
You probably can't watch speed tipping on double speed though. It's fast enough as it is. Slow that one down.
Yeah, 75% for that. YouTube be plenty fast in that.
Oh gosh. Okay, so we've talked a little bit about the sessions. So I want to talk about the new features that we saw and the direction that they're taking things, because there's always some things that I think we know, but there are some big things that are like kind of mind-blowing that come out of it. I wrote a couple down, but I want to hear from you. What were you sort of surprised by, or what did they announce that you were like, "Oh, this is something completely different. I had no idea."
We already know about side actions. I'm not going to go into it in detail, but I never thought, oh, this is going to be that awesome a feature, but it really is. It allows for customized drilling and a number of different features. And that's something that's Tableau as a product has been missing out on for a long time. Other of their competitors obviously have that feature available. Basically, all of them have that available and have had it for a number of years. So to see that available, Trent, I want to point out transparent backgrounds. It's not actually a feature that I super care about, but I would say in 2012, I put in, as a number of people have over the years, the request for transparent backgrounds. And there were a number of people on there that were like, it's never going to happen. They're wrong. It took 6 years, but it happened.
It only takes 6 years on the forums for your community idea to get promoted.
They can check off 1/3 of all of the ever suggestions. 1/3 of all suggestions have been transparent backgrounds. That's a hyperbole, everybody, for sure. It's really, there's like a lot of the spatial connections I'm super excited about as someone who does a lot of spatial work. And you just, it's not like something that is ever going to get highlighted as being very a sexy ad, but the connected to JSON files is pretty sweet. And then with Tableau Prep, there's a nice little like, I'm actually going to start using Tableau Prep now, because I can bring in statistical files like R and Python and run custom code right in there. And
oh yeah, that was huge. Yeah, I forgot that was a thing that they're like, yeah, you can run Python and R just in there. That was I totally blanked on that.
I don't think that's quite out yet, but that's like coming down the line. And that was, I just write all of my code in R, and I do all my data cleaning in R, because I eventually fit a model and then I get the output. And I think that's like, if we're talking about the features of Tableau has always touted the ability to do advanced analytics by directly connecting to R or Python or whatever tool of choice that they have connections to. But I've always pushed, like, when people have asked, like, do you use this functionality? I say, no. Why would you want to have dynamic models? You click on something, or you do a highlight action or a filter action, it runs a whole new model. And then you might not realize that you've run that model, and you're making completely wrong assumptions because you're constantly fitting models on the fly. Instead, what this allows you to do is fit your model ahead of time, which is what you should do, and then bring in that data and tell a really good story with it. That's my belief of how to use the tool. And I think with Tableau Prep, again, not something that I would normally use, this at least allows you to bring that into the tool. And favorite features, functionalities.
So like there was a lot of little things, it probably is not the coolest thing ever, but I thought the notion of webhooks was actually quite awesome, because it allowed for things that people probably take for granted. Like, I think Paul Benoob, I was sitting near him at Devs on Stage, and he was like in tears over this notion that you'd be able to send an email or an alert anytime there's some sort of update to content. I think that that's huge. The other things that I think are quite interesting that they kind of spoke about in more of the keynote, I say this, I like the direction that they're taking with natural language. You think about the progression of where it was last year, and they had it in a dashboard. And I actually asked someone, what was the pressing change for it to go from being in a dashboard to living on the server and really connecting with published data sources. And the answer I loved. I apologize for bringing this on the open, was it's just really complex. So we had to simplify it quite a bit to get started. That I love to hear. I know that we have lots of conversations about machine learning, about AI, about computers replacing humans. And I think natural language is one of those areas where people have a lot of concern that that's what's going to happen. So to know that they've kind of taken a step back and they're reassessing how it's approached and how it's actually given to consumers, I actually was like, I give them applause just for that. I think that'll be the other thing I think it'll do, and I'll let you talk, is promote the notion of published data sources. I really want us to solve the metadata layer problem. I still think that that's a thing, and maybe, at least in the Tableau ecosystem, this could be something that helps make that more legitimate.
So, yeah, I want to also add, like, that functionality of being able to search for a key idea from your data is something that I've wrestled with of whether or not it's good. And I can say for certain teams where if you were just creating a table and you're just looking up one value from that table with 1,000 filters and you're right, that is your solution now. Instead of having a table, you've got one static view of the line that you're able to get out of it.
This is your ad hoc hero. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. So, I meet it with that's one of the features that I meet with great skepticism. But that said, I think they've done it right in the way that it's being used. I definitely see uses for it for sure. And then there was one other that I was like, I'm really sad that it's coming out because I've been working on an extension for it, and that's export to PowerPoint, and I've put in all this time, and to hear like it's gonna get released, and it's like, oh, like that's great, I can't wait. But I just put in a ton of time of building an app that releases or pushes things to PowerPoint, because that's what ultimately happens for a lot of C-level reporting is I want this in PowerPoint, and of course you're just going to take a screenshot of it, but why not just have it pushed to it? So like, super excited, but I spent so much time on it.
Well, I mean, you could say that about you think about set actions and even like buttons, which are out now, right? They're kind of less highlighted there, but like there were a lot of people that built solutions that now become things that get left on shelves because
I appreciate buttons because I don't have to hack together a worksheet anymore. I can just actually have a button. And I was tired of making worksheets that I just have an action on.
Yeah, I mean, I've left organizations behind that still have that they have buttons, and to be able to have that be completely in there, I think is big. What do you think about the data modeling, the new object-oriented direction that they're taking things? I mean, I think that that's going to be something really powerful. I don't think we fully saw what that was, but I think that's really going to change how people interact with data. They claim, right? They say that this is going to solve the problem of, when you join your data and there's, replication and you've got different granularities, it's now going to be aware of your, your database architecture and conscious of those things. I'm interested to know what you think that's going to do.
So I have to confess that I didn't see all of the features and functionalities that came out because our session was immediately after it, and I had to run to a room. But I kind of caught a little bit of it, and maybe I was just a little underwhelmed by it, and that's maybe because it's basically like level of detail calculations created for you. Well, I know how to create them, so it's not that big of a deal for me. But for an average user, they can be a little bit complicated and overwhelming. So maybe it's a good feature. We'll see. But I think ultimately it's going to be a nice to have, but not necessarily like a mind blower.
I think it's hard to understand right now, right? It's kind of like set actions. You have to see it and see it hands on and touch it to be able to really fully understand. I think it's going to be helpful. I think it's
I just put some thought together. If we can use those in table calculations, then we're moving somewhere. Tableau allowed me to use level of detail calculations in table calculations, and then we've got something
See,
going
that
on.
could that could, I mean, maybe in the future that's what happens, right? So you no longer have to make a level of detail expression to do something. So that opens up a lot because of just how it's pulling back the query. So I don't think that we can underestimate what it's going to do. It's a matter of seeing it to understand how it's going to impact things, because I think it's a shift in how we've approached things.
Yeah, for sure. What do you Tableau Prep Conductor? Um, Pushing Tableau Prep onto server. It was very interesting because they didn't make any promises about pricing.
I thought it was unique that they have it as an add-on. Like it's so different that they have it as an add-on. Like it changes my perception of the platform, and not for good or bad. It was just, you think about how things have been and how they positioned it. It was different than how I had anticipated it be released. I think about Prep's competitors, and the only one that really comes to mind that's even somewhat close, and again, I'm not saying they're very similar, but would be Alteryx and the Alteryx server, and getting into that ecosystem is certainly expensive, right? It's more than a little
Yep.
bit. So certainly, I think it means something. I did have a chance to have a conversation with a project manager for Prep, and I asked her specifically about the server components, because part of that means being able to change the architecture. You think about like the backgrounders and how that processing is working. If it's no longer working on extract, it's also running Prep workflows, what that's going to look like, and kind of trying to understand that a little bit further. So I think it'll be unique to see how it plays out. It's certainly not the direction that I thought that they were going to take things. Prep is so new. People are still trying to figure out how it gets utilized in the organization. And part of that is because there have been a lot of other solutions around this problem that people are already comfortable with using. So ETL, basic
Yep.
ETL and SQL being the first one, right? And
I,
then
I
other
use
tools like
I use R.
Alteryx, whatever it is. So it's an area that still needs to be explored, I guess, would be my number one thing. And this certainly positions it differently.
I like the idea of being able to automate the Tableau Prep workflow, but I'm also going to think that that's going to be super. If I'm getting like putting on the technology hat or the technologist, is that I think it's going to be super costly to run in terms of server time. Like I think it's going to be very expensive, and the more flows that you have running, and therefore, because it's also you're going to have that the server cost, the actual just physical servers, and then this additional cost on top of it. We'll see where it goes. That's for sure. I definitely do like the direction it's going, but it's a very competitive environment. I think that's we'll see how they manage to take market share.
Yeah. I mean, I think you're totally right. Like and you can even see where that's going to take things, right? Like, are you running work? I asked a question like, well, obviously you're going to have one workflow bleed into another workflow. So how do you manage even that? How do you manage running things serialized, or, are you going to run workflows in parallel? And how do you ensure that if you have dependencies on a prior workflow, that stuff gets put into play as you're building things out, which are just natural questions that I think happen anytime you're doing any sort of data processing. So is it time? Okay, is it time for us to talk about
It's
Iron Viz?
Iron Viz time. We knew we were going to talk about it. I don't want to say it was controversial by any means, but it's definitely a lot of people, those random people out there, have been asking lots of questions. What do we think? Um,
Well,
and
go ahead.
yeah, so it's like not to beat around it, but it's like everybody, no matter who wins, period, there's always going to be a conversation of what did you think? Is that who you had written down? I think that's really what we're talking about, is that who cares who won? We really want to highlight some of the strengths of each of the authors, because we can't, like, I went and won a competition immediately before in a 10-minute battle, and I created like 1/50th of what they did. So I'm a little concerned about my ability to be on stage next year. And these guys crushed it for sure. And I think that like again, putting things in perspective for me, build something in 10 minutes. And even if you've rehearsed it, I can guarantee they have done so much work to get there. And they're all deserving for sure, because like being on stage in front of 17,000 people and another 10, 20,000 people or 50,000, whatever the number is online, no pressure. And I think for each of them, they would have said, and I know this for sure from Corey, is that just being able to execute on what you planned is a win. And I think that's absolutely the mindset that each of them should take. That said, and should we talk about each of the entries?
We should. I want to echo your sentiment first that like there was definitely a part of me that's like, wow, they have to do a lot to even be up there on the stage. And it's not easy to execute that in front of all those people and under those lights. So part of me was like, I don't think I could do this. The other part of me is like, I really want to be up there. Like a bigger part of me is like, I'm still really want to be up there. But part of me is like, every year it gets more difficult. And this is truly something spectacular. And so no matter what I say and what you say, like it can't undercut that my biggest takeaway was like, I don't think that I could do what they did. I mean, maybe when I got up there, but I have the most respect for the three of those people to be able to dedicate the amount of time and energy and thought to something like that. It requires, as I said in the beginning, when Ben asked me, it takes dedication, practice. It takes
You were featured. You were featured. They're like, and Jackson, person who has been around doing them all, top 5 or top 10 in all 3, only person. You must be the best, Anne.
No, I'm just the most consistent. Yeah, I'm just always the bridesmaid, never the bride. And that's okay. But it really does take the things that I mentioned. It takes time, it takes persistence, it takes consistency, it takes heart to be able to do it in a feeder, and then to do it up there is something else. Okay, so fine. Talking about the 3 different ones, so let's talk about the subject. What do you think about weather as a topic?
I loved it. I love the idea of talking about weather because there is so much data out there, and they like, really nailed the data source. Right at the end, we heard from, I should really write this down. I should have done it. I didn't take notes, but it's like
Vice President of Meteorological Insight from IBM. Exactly. Is that who you're talking about?
Yeah,
I don't know.
IBM meteorologist, sir. It's really cool. Like he wanted 2 things highlighted, and I wrote them down somewhere.
Oh.
And now I've lost my notes, which is okay. I know one of them for sure is that he wanted to see the emotion of weather told in a story, and he felt like all 3 hit on that. And the other was climate change. So it was very interesting that he wanted to somehow rope in climate change through this entire conversation. Because I don't think that's where any of them went, obviously, was talking about climate change, but he brought it up, so it really made me wonder more. And I know the data set a little. I didn't get to see it, but I asked a lot of questions of everybody. And from what I understand is that there was about 17,000 cities, and there was 1 row for every day in a year, which gives you about 7 million rows of data, and I think there was somewhere around 200 columns, and I'm sure a lot of them are semi-redundant information that help you kind of get placeholder of all the information. But it's really interesting because there's so many stories you could tell, and then weather data has like this natural, it's cyclical, and we definitely saw that in the solutions that were created. Highlighted the cyclical nature given that it's a year. But anyway, that's your thoughts on the data.
So, I like the idea of weather data. I'm glad to know that it was kind of aggregated to the day, because the weather data can actually be quite tricky to work with. So I'm glad that they did some pre-aggregation. I'll say that much. The kind of my immediate thoughts on what the 3 different competitors gave was surprising from my perspective, because they all went very macro with it. I was expecting more microscopic. I was expecting more drilled in, focused, and I was quite surprised that the end result for all 3 of them had some sort of flavor of large weather comparatives. I don't know if that's just by nature of the data set, but I thought that was different. And it's kind of weird for me because my last feeder entry was somewhat related to weather. It was about droughts in Arizona. So I felt like, maybe if I had worked with this data set, I could have somehow weaved my own flavor on it. And that's how I approach such a large topic.
Maybe, yeah. So I think you do make a good point that maybe they were macro, but then I look at some of them and they're all like city focused. So
True.
maybe can you like, as you say that, I'm going to push back and say, is it really macro? Because there was a lot of snapshots of city information in there.
I guess I say it from this perspective. They all had an opportunity to add and enrich data to this. And the data that they added on wasn't any more detailed for a specific place, right?
Got it.
That's where I think it's quite different, right? So if you could have weaved in like, hey, let's focus on the weather in some place and then pull in some other information, right? Even if you focus on and again, I'm making stuff up. It's really easy for me to make things up after the fact. Let's focus in on this and then let's see how housing prices were impacted because of some massive catastrophic weather event or whatever it is. Maybe it's even just like migration of humans or something like that. That's where I think they kind of threw me off guard in not capitalizing or not going down the path is more appropriate, not going down the path of adding on secondary data that was more detailed, if that makes sense.
Got it. Yeah, that does. I would say that there was either two views with the data. They were either at the city view or the world view. And
Yeah.
I would have loved to see, if we're critiquing a regional view or maybe a sub-regional view. I can't do this. I certainly haven't figured out how to create stuff fast. But if we are critiquing and we're trying to provide that moment of, hey, where could we have seen it? Because again, you look at them and we've got what is essentially a comparison of cities that you can compare weather, rainfall, wind speeds, temperature. You've got a great way to, again, compare temperature of cities and then identify a city that maybe you wanted to live in that would be similar. And then again, comparing cities across latitudes and comparing those patterns within them. But also that ties in some of the the position of the Earth. But so they're all really, even though I think this is where I'm like, are you sure it's really at the macro level? But at the same time, like there was these individual just comparisons of cities on these same factors, and maybe that's all that's in the data, and that we're left to speculate, and we'll never really know. But would have loved to see like a regional view of things.
Yeah, I think it would have been a different take, but it's hard, I mean, you sized up the data set. I mean, if it's 7 million rows and 200 columns wide, and you're like, well, I'm only going to pull out, one city, that can feel somewhat limiting. I think we all like to take on big data sets and say, how much of this can we use? I think that would probably have been a natural thing for me to have felt as well throughout that process is like, well, if I have 7 million, do I really just take, X number? Who knows?
Yeah. That said, like those are our main critiques. It's like, if we're going to critique, which is what we do sometimes, because it would be unfair of us to not, if we would just say, good job, everybody, which good job, everybody.
Yeah,
But
great job. Great job. So a couple great jobs in my mind. One was like, great job to Ludovic for bringing on like a different sort of chart type and actually making what I would call data art with the data.
Design.
Yes.
He was like, there's three, just like for if people don't know, there's three categories. There's design, storytelling, and analysis. And I don't think if we're like rating these, like I think he knocked it out of the park. There were two stunning moments for me where I was just like, ooh, during this Iron Viz build out. And one of them was like they flipped the screen from just having the conversation. And I immediately knew what Ludo was doing. He was building some like circular thing. And I was like, that's eye candy. That to me is already miles ahead of where everybody else is at.
Yeah, I think so I'll give Corey props for having the guts to use a beta version of Tableau and Iron Viz. I remember I looked at you and I was like, I don't understand. He's using set actions. Like, this is not a shipped thing. And he's just full on really stretching the boundaries of what was capable, at least on that given day. And I think that shows a lot of bravery and
Yep.
innovation.
Yeah, for sure. I think for him, he had the other moment where I was like, whoa. And that was it. He's had the best story that I've heard since Shine 4 years ago. So I feel like he really just had a really great story and put it together, and it felt like it was devs on stage, which is definitely production. And his story of this was like, I'm going to demo everything coming out of this on stage right now during Iron Viz. I'm going to show you how it's all connected to the day to day. And that just having that story was like awesome. That's I don't if you got points for selling the product at and that was storytelling, he nailed it.
Yeah.
We got the winner, and what we discount a little bit, and that should certainly be taken into effect, is the amount of work that Timothy did to prep his data. There's so much extra information that he brought in that is helping make this visualization the winner.
Mm. I thought it was, he definitely gets extra credit for having two completely different takes on it, for showing two side by side things. It was definitely I think you're probably right that he probably enriched the data set the most. So certainly, I think, and I'd say he probably had the most analytical take on things. He
Yep.
was the one who truly had like a question, and he really wanted to, I like to say this, interrogate the data and come up with an answer and really figure out what was fueling that. So I think that flowed really well in looking back at it. So, the way he even drew out that story of like, let's start at this latitude and then let's understand what the influence, the drivers are behind those things.
I also think he played the game the best. This is a game, of course, and the use of animation is essential when you're doing something live. Like, this is in person. Do the most you can do to really make things shine. I don't like, some people call it cheating. I call it playing the game. And it was a brilliant use. Like, everybody should always be using animation or pages to create pseudo-like animation. It's really, I think, a miss if everybody's like, if every people are like, I'm not going to use it because it's a cop out. It's not a cop out. It's playing the game.
Well, I think there are other things that he did that really played the game well. So, on that vein, like the default colors, right? So he's stuck for the most part with that blue and orange divergent palette, right? It's kind of funny. He played both the light game, the white background and the dark background game, right? Which was a stark difference between Ludwig's, like, which again was designed. I mean, you look at, as I look back at it, he's not using a default font. He's made intentional decisions on capitalization and titling and how grid lines look, the stuff that I care about a lot personally. And that's different than what Timothy did, which was much more, let's keep things at a default level and lay them out in such a way that certain things happen. I mean, obviously it's kind of interesting this year that he had animation again. Animation was one of those hot button topics. Last year, I sigh on the topic because I don't think it's a cop out. I think it's just kind of difficult because while I think it enhances the presentation and it's merit, it has space, it is a feature that works. It's a little bit difficult when you think about it being a data, using your words, a data product or a multifaceted analytical display, using my terms, that someone's going to end up using at the end of the day. Corey's, I think, hit that mark the best. His was a tool that could step out of that competition and continue to persist indefinitely.
I think I would. You certainly like Corey's, and I couldn't vote. I didn't vote because I got so excited that I was going to pee my pants and had to walk out and then missed the opening to vote.
I didn't vote. There is no vote. They're all winners in my mind. Like,
but you could vote. That's a cop out. You have the opportunity to put on Twitter who you think should have won, and
You know,
Um,
I think the only person I've ever voted for, I can't remember if I actually voted last year, but certainly when Curtis was up on stage 2 years ago, I did selfishly vote and cheerlead for him, and rightfully so. In retrospect, obviously, him being the winner, I chose the right horse, but he ended up with a clear winner. I think from that, they were all still spectacular or whatever, but it's very difficult, I think, to judge someone in the 20 minutes that you see and how they share things on a clear winner. And especially what I found to be true, having gone through this experience so many times, is that my judging criteria doesn't quite line up with the actual judging
you
criteria.
already know that my criteria for all of the competitions leading into it are completely different, and I don't give a crap about it. I was just about to curse. I don't give two cares about it, and I am. I love the math and the design of things. So um, that's where I would have put my vote, is on whatever is going to be much more design heavy. That said, like, we have three people that went in. They each had a focus in a different area. One was great on design, one was great on storytelling, and one was great on analysis. And when it comes down to it, it's going to be who played the game best. And you know what wins? Things that look and shine pretty and move around. And that's okay, because that's the game.
It's like, yes, but not too shiny, right? Like, utility, I don't think goes away in the context of this competition.
All other things are all other things equal. Like, everybody else like balanced each other out. I'm sure this was like right down a nail biter for sure.
Okay, so we've talked about Iron Viz. I still want to participate. I still want to be up on that stage. Do you still are you planning on participating in the feeders next year?
um it's become part of what I do at this point. I'm 3 years in. I've done nine straight, so I'm 0 for 9 in the last nine, obviously forever, but the last nine I've done. And I hope to continue my streak of 0-4s, because I would love to get to 12 next year. I'm not afraid to lose, uh, going down, swinging with doing some crazy stuff, just so that I can keep my perspective uh, showing and doing what I do, because I don't want to compromise just to some criteria. We talked about this already. Like, I'm, and I think maybe we should say that there's one other thing that we got to do this go around, is that we got to talk uh, to individuals about how to reshape, or it's not even reshape, because it's already a really great um, thing, a really great event that's being done by Tableau for its community. It doesn't have to do this. Obviously, it gets a lot of people engaged, and but it's just something that's really nice to do. And I just being involved in feedback in two different ways. One of them was at Fanalytics, sitting at a table and discussing it. I think one of the like bigger takeaways for me on this is, well, there's two takeaways that I take from our conversations. Is one, that not everybody's in it to win it, and we need to be able to recognize that. And the best analogy that you can, like, if you're someone who's like immediately pushing back and saying, Luke, that's not true. Well, there are people who run half marathons that don't do it for competition. They're in it for the spirit of it, and we need to be able to recognize that. And some people really enjoy like a participation, somehow recognition for their participation. I think we need to think about that. Sue Glass really came up with that, uh, and she's in the Tableau community, and that like really struck with me. I was like, that is one of the best analogies that I've heard for it. And then the other is like, we have this popularity vote. So like, I've won the popular vote in the past, and I won it because one of my colleagues sent in and said, "Hey guys," well, it was actually like peer pressure, because it's from another office, and they're saying, "Hey, don't forget to vote for so and so." And then another person sends one, and then we send one, and then you have everybody in the office going in and voting, and it's like an easy win because you get 50, 60 votes, and that's all it takes. Like, by far, it doesn't take a lot. This is not we're not talking multi-thousand community. It's, active participants in this are in the hundreds, period. And if you're able to garner 50 to 70 votes, you're guaranteed to get it. So I've been there and I've won it because of that. But I feel like there's so much toxicity around that and people gunning for it. And when someone doesn't win it, it like brings out the worst in the community. So let's just get rid of the thing that brings the worst. There's no, like, we can find a replacement award for it that can really highlight something. Um, Popular vote just develops cliques. Uh, it develops tribes and like feedback loops that are really tiny. And I think that doesn't do the community any good.
Well, like one thing I'll say is like the popular vote might not be the this is going to sound really bad. The popular vote might not know what the best is, right? I mean, to some degree, the popular vote is like what they're most attracted to, and maybe that's not the best utilization, right? If I'm being kind of putting on like my Edward Tufte hat or something, like if I'm being really hard nosed about it, it might not be the best analytical display or the best way to display a data set. It might just have really, it might just be good eye candy. Or again, it may just be someone who has more friends than someone else, or they went on, you know, Mechanical Turk and they had someone sign up and just click a star button several times. So I'm in alignment with that. I think you touched on something interesting. So coming out of Fanalytics last year, a lot of the changes that happened for the feeder this year occurred because of conversations last year. It really shaped the direction that the competition went. You had the opportunity to be at Fanalytics this year and talk about some of the aftermath of what happened and further the direction that it's going to go. What do you think is on the horizon for Iron Viz? What do you think we're going to see different? And I'll even start out and say, some of the parameters for participation changed this year. And I think that the impact and I think even the feedback component that was changed this year probably didn't hit the competition the way it was anticipated.
Yeah. And I think that, so I think you're trying to be super diplomatic about it. And I think I would say that there were a lot of people who just didn't think that the feedback was very good or didn't provide enough structure. And getting feedback from judges, and they're judging 70, 80 of these, is really difficult. So you can't imagine that they're going to give you the sort of feedback that's really going to take it to a next level. And if you want that type of feedback, you shouldn't look to the judges for it. They're judging your work. Look to your peers to provide that information. I think that's like, we've talked about this. We talked about this in previous podcasts where it's like, and you should just ask for feedback in that moment. You're someone who craves it, versus I'm like, hey, Anne, what do you think of this as it's being completed? And that's what people need to do. I do think, though, like some of the changes that need to happen are that we are seeing. So I think I also liked the idea of having a month to do it was great. It gave individuals who would not otherwise have the ability to do it, the ability to participate. However, if you were trying to participate and win, that gave the people who really had a ton of time even more time to pull ahead from other competitors. So with all great intentions, it probably didn't work out exactly how it was hoped to. I feel like I can empathize. Usually I would put in 100% of my time for that entire time to get something created. And I could only put in maybe half a week. And knowing that someone's got 8 times the amount of time, I'm not going to be competitive. And it's just what it is. That said, like, we had a really good conversation with Andy Cotgreave one evening. And I think one of the like very tangible things that could be possible is to have 3 feeders that don't follow the exact same specifications for the rules. All you need to do is say double the score in each of the key areas. So one will be the design entry, one will be the storytelling entry, and another could be the analysis section. So then when you come on the stage, you can be like the winner of the design feed, the winner of the storytelling feed, and the winner of the analysis feed. And then you have 3 different individuals that have different emphasis coming together, and now it's like on the same, everybody's on the same playing field. They each have different skills that they're bringing to the table, and you don't have like this monolithic approach that you had 3 winners and all the 3 winners that won with the same criteria. And of course they're battling head to head. It's going to be super competitive in that sense, but and we definitely saw it this year. Like, I'm saying this, but we had a design, a storytelling, and an analysis person. And I would have loved to be able to like highlight those areas to have like maybe a little bit more diverse set of individuals up on stage.
Yeah, I definitely like the concept because, as well, like you think about those people that are in it for participation, how much more valuable would it be for them to be part of a feeder that has more emphasis on design, to see what the top entries look like or to see how they stack up as part of it? I think it could be a more conscious way to practice skills, which is something I know we both really like.
Hmm.
It's something that you need. So I think that could be really cool. And then when you think about it play out on stage at the end of the year, it's obviously probably going to make for a more diverse competition.
Yep, absolutely. I think those are some like very key takeaways that we're talking about for maybe next year that we fingers crossed can somehow get into the competition. It's not a guarantee by any means, but it'd be super cool to see those small, subtle changes tweak tweak this tweak the system because it's going really well. There's just a couple of things that need to get fixed, and these are potential solutions for them.
Yeah. I mean, things I don't want taken away is the amount of increased transparency, both around the judging, the feedback that was given. I mean, yes, there could be better parameters and boundaries in terms of how the feedback gets presented to people or what it ends up saying. That's fine. People are going to be people; they have opinions, but the transparency around participation from the demographic breakdowns, from the scoring. I appreciate those things and I do not want those things to go away. I think that they are extremely helpful. So, if nothing else, I'm happy with the way it is. I actually even like the idea of knowing what the topic is kind of upfront and having time to think about it. It becomes easier to manage and more time to noodle around your thoughts on it than
Yep.
in prior years.
If we know the topics and the timelines ahead of time, I feel like
Yeah.
those were the. If that would have just been this year, that would have already been super transformational. And also, when we say Tableau is doing this, there's really just one or maybe two people behind the
Yeah,
scenes who
it's
are
a
really
small
running the
team.
show. Like it is. If you haven't ever met him, Scott Teal is like running the show on this or did this year. So give that man a little bit of respect. Like there's he's put up with a lot in the community because the community just will sound off and in their frustration and don't realize that there are so many people involved in the community doing this, but there's so few individuals running the show behind the
Yeah.
scenes because this is that like if you're talking about this as a profit center for Tableau, it is not that. Like they're spending money on this, and it's probably really difficult to judge the ROI from an Iron Viz competition at a customer conference that is like spread out over basically a half a year. And if you include Europe, like it's an entire year job doing this. And I just don't think that he gets enough credit for the amount of work that he's doing because he's busting his rear end for sure.
Yeah. Completely. Completely. Okay, Luke. So what's really popular right now is to have resolutions coming out of conference. So, yeah, I know. I'm going to spring this on you. What are your resolutions coming out of conference?
I don't have resolutions. I don't believe in resolutions. That said, there are things that I want to get better at and constantly improve at. So I feel like a resolution is a term that often is then associated with not
Fine.
following through. So
What is your
things that I
alternative?
want to get better at. Yeah,
Okay.
and that's where I think
Opportunity.
the things that I want to get better at, things that we have already talked about, is that uh, is we have this vehicle called Workout Wednesday to improve individuals' overall technical skills inside of Tableau. And what I would love to do is find ways to get individuals into it faster and easier. And we've got a ton of feedback and we're already trying to implement that. So number one is like creating a starter kit. Two is breaking all the analytics we have down on all of our sessions, all of our challenges, and providing that information so that people can then go into challenges that might be easier, more difficult, that are topic specific. Um, you name it. Like I want to be able to break that down, and I want to grow what we're doing in that space because I think it's a skill that people need to learn the deep technical skills and be able to do them really fast so that they can create more mind-blowing customized stuff for their own work or for Makeover Monday or for their hobby, you name it. Like it'd be, and learning those technical skills go a long way.
It's kind of similar. So one of my big resolution is be share more of my problem solving or solutions or thought processes in a medium that people appreciate more. And one of them I think is video. I think we've got a lot of positive feedback about this interaction that we have and being on camera and having this conversation. I think the same thing is true when you think about Curtis Harris and how he's giving, video solutions, guided solutions to Workout Wednesday. So that's one of the things that I think that is very top of mind for me is if I'm doing something, really make a conscious effort to make it more approachable and shareable. And I think video could be the way to do that. And then probably my other resolution.
I'm smiling on that one because I think we've already talked about how we need to just provide solutions on video and provide bullet points on a few of those key takeaways for sure.
It's huge. Yeah, it's huge. I think, for people that are intimidated and in that sort of curse of knowledge of like, I don't know how to solve this problem, but I still am interested. I want to know how it works. That alleviates some of those things and it's going to help them feel more comfortable. So that's certainly, obviously, you can hold me to that one that we need
and then
more video content.
And seeing experts struggle is always a relief. Like you don't think that, oh, we just solve stuff really quickly. Like there's three of us, you, Roddy, myself, and we're doing these problems every week. And then, for the most part, we do each other's. In fact, I joked with you, I haven't actually posted on Twitter this, is that we both came up, like I was creating the same exact problem that you released this week for 2 weeks down the line. And I didn't show it, but it's like, to see my struggle in creating that would have been reassuring for people. And I think that's, what people like Curtis putting that out there and they're having that brutal honesty of like, I don't know what I'm doing. Like it's going to take me a while to figure this out. And he's a Iron Viz winner and is well respected in the community. I think that's the type of vulnerability that the community needs.
Yeah, absolutely. So that I think is number one. Number two, I want Data Plus Women to be a keynote session. And then maybe, what would be interesting.
Yes, let's make that happen. Come on, Tableau, what's the deal?
Come on, guys. I would love to see everyone be there. Like, can we please just do this? Like, it's so pressing. And again, it's been something that's very powerful for me in my career and the way I just interact with people. So I'd love to see that be up there. And then my last thing is just be more available more of the time. I think I could do a much better job having more one-on-one conversations with people and continuing conversations. And that's one thing I'm really doing coming out of this conference is fostering new friendships. We did this last year, right? We met at Iron Viz. We fostered this friendship. And now we've got this really magical podcast. We have Workout Wednesday. We've got so much going for us from a collaboration perspective. I know, because we sat next to each other at Iron Viz and just continued that conversation. So, I think so just even that concept in general of, I've said this to other people, finding people that are less visible and making them more visible, I feel like is a role and responsibility for me to take on as someone who feels slightly more visible than I felt in prior years. So I think a lot of that is just fostering and nurturing friendships, relationships that you form, and making sure that if you have a platform, if you have a space, that you are including those people in whatever it is that you're doing. That's ultimately what's going to make everyone smarter.
Absolutely. And I think you're saying that, and I just want to point out that from day one with Workout Wednesday is that I wanted to use Workout Wednesday as a vehicle to find great women and men who are great at what they're doing and just haven't been recognized for it, and being able to surface them up to the rest of the community. And I feel like we're doing that a little bit, but we can always do it better for sure. And I think more one-on-one conversations for sure is something that we've definitely been missing out on. Like, great job on Twitter is not enough to highlight someone. We need to figure out other ways as well to really push them to the top and highlight their skills, because I think it's a potential vehicle to do that for sure.
Yeah. So viewers, please feel free to bother me incessantly and do the same.
You heard it. Go to Anne.
We'll see what I can do. Certainly there's conversations to be had. And I think there's no shortage of care and passion from my end. So if you want to talk about Tableau, if you want to talk about the conference, you want to talk about data, you want to talk about whatever, you want to talk about tabletop games and cats as well, I'm down for those subjects.
So I think maybe we can just wrap things up here. I think that was that's it. We're done. Perfect podcast. We had no cuts. We're approaching an hour and a half. Josh, enjoy cutting this video.
I don't think there'll be much to cut, honestly. There'll be probably like two or
three moments.
Yeah, but I think we just like play it through start to finish. So I think
there's no cuts whatsoever. We've done it. Hopefully we can cut this in somehow. Is that all of a sudden I have a cat in my arms? I don't have an entourage. You have an entourage.
I have an entourage of one.
And by the way, your entourage is like your secret power